This is basically an FAQ page. Let me just show you. So these are the frequently asked questions. This is a question. Well, this is how many team members can I invite? What is the maximum file upload size? Boom, boom, boom. And one of the things that happens is that whenever you hover over an FAQ, the question turns orange, right? Question turns orange. Another thing is that whenever you click on a FAQ, it actually opens up. So those are the two. The FAQ is one thing that we're going to focus on. How I did the image, that's another thing I'm going to focus on. And the last thing that we're going to focus on is the responsiveness. Hold on. The responsiveness. As you can see right here, boom, it's mobile friendlier as all sites should be. And as you can see, boom. So it was a bit difficult actually pulling this off, but let's go through everything. So for the setup is largely the same as the previous video. Link in the description, by the way. Is largely the same as the previous video. So let's go on to the style guide right here. So as you can see in the style guide, we get our colors and we get our the typography, and the weights. And what I did this time, it's a separate CSS file, separate from the index HTML. In the root, we did the standard. I added some breakpoints. I added the colors, and then I also imported the font from Google Fonts. And as standard, padding 0, margin 0, box sizing, border box. So I think that was for the setup. We covered this, the colors and the fonts. And another thing I would like to cover is the gradient, right? So let's take a look. Can you see here? It goes from a pink to bluish color. So basically, this is the background linear gradient, and then there are also others. So for this, I used the gradient maker from Colors or Coolers, however it's meant to be pronounced. And basically, in this, you can basically make gradients. It's like a tool to just make gradients, and then you can copy the CSS. Hold on. Copy the CSS. Here's all the CSS. You can press copy, and then right in there, you can just paste in the gradients. So that was a really nice tool that I used. So yeah, that was about it. I think for the body, there isn't much to go over. So here we just say display flex direction column, align item center, justify content center. So let's go back here. As you can see, we just have in the body, we just have the FAQ, the whole entire FAQ box, and then the attributes that front end mentor requires us to put. We have a justify content center. So basically all the contents within the body will just align to the center right here. And the width, I made it 100 view width. Actually, yeah, that's fine. The width, I made it 100 view width. Minimum height of the body, 100 view height. Overflow Y, scroll, and then the background. Oh yes, another thing that we would also use is the Cum Sans typeface. And then just in case the Cum Sans typeface doesn't load, we use a serif typeface. And then for the color is already provided from the root. So that covers the body. Now I wanted us to go over the HTML, right? So what's in the HTML? So I basically shrank the head because we're not going over that. But let's look at the body. So for the body, it was mainly comprised of, okay, this is separate. The image, although it's outside of the FAQ box, you're going to see why it's outside of the FAQ box in a minute. But largely, the body only contains these two. And this is basically useless. We do not care about this. Let's take a look at the code quickly. That's all there is. Nobody cares about this. We're trying to look at the FAQ box, the actual project itself. This whole entire majestic piece right here. So, for the everything that's in here was put in an FAQ box. Let's inspect that. Okay, no, that's the body. Let's take that. Boom. Everything is placed in an FAQ box, right? And then within the FAQ box, we have the images. So the hero image, the div, the hero image, basically contains all the images for desktop and mobile and the background illustrations right here. Let's just take a look at, no, that's mobile design. Where did I put it again? Oh, images, right? Hey, to view those SVG, now we're going to view it in the code. Hey, it's not easy to open up SVG, then I'll have to open up a browser or something. But that is about it within the FAQ box. Another thing we're going to cover is the FAQ itself. Here you can see H1 FAQ, but I would like us to cover, man, I just realized that this would have been perfect, like with React. I'm gonna drop React videos in the future, but man, this would have been so awesome to do in React. But then this was a new project, so So basically, this is an FAQ element, and everything within here is basically an FAQ element. An FAQ element is basically the whole entire. Hold on, that's not the FAQ element. That's the Hold on, that's the FAQ element. Can you see that blue rectangle? It basically contains the question, the arrow indicator, and the answer, right? So let me open up one FAQ element. As you can see here, we have H3, the question itself. We were provided with an SVG icon, an arrow icon, and here is the answer. So one important thing that we are gonna, this is actually important, and it's important for you to actually remember this, because this is gonna be used when we are styling, when we are styling the whole entire thing. When we are in the CSS, we're gonna use the data FAQ state, and basically the idea is that there are two different states. There's an opened state, and down here, as you can see, there's a closed state. So that is going to be really, really important because we're going to use JavaScript. Let me just show you a glimpse of it. We're going to use JavaScript for each, and then as you can see here, it is going to be important for our JavaScript, and it's also going to be important for styling. But we will go over that in a quick second. Now, the image. I remember while doing this, the image looked so simple. But then I remember the one thing that messed me up. Let me close the FAQ section. Let's open up the hero image. The one thing that messed me up was this box right here. Let me show you this box. This right here. The bane of my existence. Right here, as you can see, it's separate, right? So why is the image separate? Well, this box is its own illustration, right? Can you see that right here, down here? It's its own illustration. And then this whole entire illustration of the woman with the computer is its own illustration. And I'm not so sure if you're going to be able to notice. Just look there. Look at the image that's being displayed within the inspector. you will see a shadow right there on the left. That's meant to indicate the shadow of the box. Yet they did not include that box here, but they did that for a specific reason. Now, if you look at the illustration of the woman, and okay, let's look at the background illustration, right? That's basically these lines. It's not visible from here. Hold on. It's not visible from here, but these lines right here, that's basically the background illustration. So if we were to look at both of these illustrations, they're inside, which means they're inside the FAQ box, right? This white box. And if it were to overflow or out of bounds of that box, we basically, how do I say, hidden. There's a overflow hidden with the FAQ box, right? But then if we were to put this image inside the hero image, it would not display because the FAQ box itself has the CSS property overflow hidden. Let me just try to put that within hero image and let's see the results, right? Can you see that it disappears? It's most likely here, but because the FAQ box has the CSS property overflow hidden, we cannot see it. That's why it's important for us to, that's why it was actually outside of the hero image. Now, another purpose of the hero image was that we wanted to basically put all the illustration, the SVG illustrations, within one element. And this was important for responsiveness because it was easier to just handle all the images within this one element instead of having a bunch of separate elements, instead of having a bunch of separate image tags out just flaring about. So basically we had this hero image, we had this hero image element, right? So that was why we had this box. It seemed abnormal at first, but let me go to the stylings. Let's go up top. As you can see, we have a FAQ box. Let me show you. Here it is, overflow hidden. That's why whenever the box, when it was inside the hero image, we weren't able to see it. And yeah, these are the other attributes. This is important, position relative, because we actually position some of the images inside. And then the max width, it was saved. Background, yeah, that was saved. And then the margin, 0 and 16 pixels, border radius. I think these are fairly easy to understand, these CSS properties, so I'll just close that. And then here's the hero image, position relative. Now, for, well, should I cover the response? No, the responsiveness will be covered later. But basically, whenever it's in desktop view, whenever the screen is wide, the background illustration, the mobile version of the background illustration and the mobile version of the hero illustration will be display hidden, or display none, sorry, because we do not want to display that. It's not in mobile view. Whereas now if we do this, it's most likely displayed. The background illustration and the mobile illustration. Now, another important thing to note is that there is no overflow. Man, this project, it was so frustrating when I did this last year. I remember I was scratching my head and I was screaming because of this. But I did crack it. I eventually cracked it. As you can see, the image now, it actually is on top. It's allowed room to breathe. You know, I should actually put a margin, because can you see that? I should put a margin right there at the top or something. But the image here, now look at this. There is no box. The box, remember that box that was on the side? It's grayed out because the mobile illustration has this box. It inherently has this box. Yo, oh my, guys, this image, it did things to me, man. like it traumatized me, but I eventually cracked it. So now that we've covered the image, I would like us to cover the FAQ itself, right? So basically this. So let's go to the HTML. Let me close this, and yeah, we will cover from this top right here. So for the FAQ, okay, hero image is closed. Let me close script. For the FAQ, here we have H1, heading 1. For the FAQ, that's basically this. And well, that's not really important. Then we have the FAQ element, right? So right here is the FAQ element. So now here in the design, let's go to the design real quickly. Desktop design. There's something that you'll notice. We already covered the heading 1, but we also have these horizontal lines. So that was really easy to do because after each FAQ element, we basically had an HR. I forgot what HR stands for. Human resource. Basically, we had a HR, right? So that we already covered. Now, let's look at an FAQ element itself. The big daddy. This was okay. First, let's cover the hovering, right? So let's take a look at something. I'm hovering over an FAQ element, and as you can see, the question has been highlighted orange. So this was easy to do. Let's take a look at the structure of this, right? This is an FAQ element. Let's go back here. FAQ HR, FAQ element. So basically this is not really necessary. I'm just showing you the code. And then let's go to FAQ question, right? So FAQ question is basically display flex because we have a question. Hold on. Here it is, right? Question. This is H3 and then class question. And we have the actual question itself. But we also have this image. Oh my goodness. You know, it would have been better if I just had made this like a div and then wrapped the whole entire question in an H3. Yeah, that would have been better. Oh, that would have been better. I don't know. Okay, but that's besides the point, right? So we have this question. A question has the question itself and the arrow indicator. So that's why we have a display flex, and the flex direction is row. Although it's not specified, it's the default. We align the items to center, justify between, because we want as much space as possible between the question and the arrow indicator. And then we also have a cursor pointer. Like this wasn't really necessary, but I think the cursor pointer just ensures that the user knows that this is clickable, that they can interact with this, right? That's why I use the cursor pointer. But that's besides the question. Now let's look at the hover, right? So remember, this is an FAQ element. Let's look at this. This is an FAQ element, right? FAQ element. Let's get that in our heads. Now the FAQ element is a parent of the question element, right? So here we said when we have a hover right here, right? So basically this whole entire selector basically says when the FAQ element is hovered, the question which is inside the FAQ element should be, the color should change to text color soft red, and we made this important. So you need to know how CSS selectors work. It's really easy. I mean, hey man, CSS selectors can I have fun with CSS selectors, I'm not gonna lie, but basically you just need to understand the basics of this. If you understand, because the question element is basically a child of the FAQ element, but we are trying to specify that whenever the user hovers or the cursor hovers over the FAQ element, the question should be text color soft red, right? So that's how we do it. So that covers the hover. That's simple. That's the simple stuff. That's the simple stuff. But now we need, remember that the data attribute that we talked about quite earlier. This is where it comes into play. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, right? Let me close this. So basically, we can style this. We can actually use the data as a CSS selector, right? So basically, let's go here. Now, can you see here? We say an FAQ element. So this basically grabs an FAQ element from the DOM, from HTML, from the DOM, document object model. I still remember that after 3 years. Wow, the document object model. Hold on. Is it the document object model? Is it document object? It is document object model. Wow. I still remember. Nice. Okay, anyway. So basically we're trying to get the FAQ element, right? And then this right here on the side basically specifies that if the element that we're getting, all the FAQ elements that we get, if they have a data FAQ state of closed, that's when we can apply the following styles. Okay, yeah, now there's a question. But just like in the hover section, remember what we discussed in the hover section, basically this means that the question that has a parent of FAQ element, the question that has a parent of FAQ element where the FAQ element has a data FAQ state of closed, then the font weight should just be 400, right? So if it's closed, the font weight should be 400, so it's quite thin. I think the normal font weight, I think, is 300, or is it 400? 300 or 400, somewhere there, right? And then if the state, data FAQ state is opened, the question should have a margin bottom, and then it should have this color right here, right? So basically now it's darker. It's darker. I hope that makes sense, right? Because if the FAQ element has a data FAQ state of open, basically meaning that the FAQ is opened, that the user has opened it, then you can apply this, right? And then this also applies for the same with the arrow indicator, because remember, the arrow indicator is a child of question, which is a child of FAQ element. Let's go back to the HTML and let's confirm that, right? Here's the class. Arrow indicator is a child of question, which is a child of FAQ element, right? So actually, the way I did it here, one can argue that it's, well, no, this part is necessary. This part is necessary. But let's go up here. One could argue that this is not required, and essentially it really isn't, right? But whenever the web page starts becoming complex, right? Okay, this might go off on a tangent, but whenever the website becomes complex, if you just have selected that just says dot question, right? It's obvious. If you know CSS, you know that this person is trying to get an element with the class question. But then there's confusion, because if the web page is huge, what are you actually referring to, right? That becomes a question. What question are you referring to? Because maybe there's another element in another section that has the class of question. So it's important that you indicate exactly what you're talking about. So this makes it clear that you're talking about a question that's under an FAQ element. And this doesn't only apply to the way other programmers or other coders will read your code, but even when styling, if you have an element that has question and you just do this, right? If you have an element that has questions, let's say you have in the home section or in the landing page section, you have an element with a question. And then in another section, let's just say the footer maybe, you also have another element with the class name of section. They will have the exact same CSS properties. Whereas if you do this, it will recognize that the way the web page will be styled is that it will recognize that you are trying to refer to the question that's under the FAQ element. That is really necessary. And as a page grows, it becomes more complex. So that's why, okay, now this is a tangent, but I have to show you, right? So basically you might have, let's just call this learn.scss. This is where you can actually find that instead of dealing with normal CSS like this, I remember this is why I love SAS and SCSS so much. Instead of doing this, because now the file can get huge, man, you can see some huge CSS files, trust me. But instead in SAS, you can actually just do this, and then we can move this inside. Oh man, look at wait, and then you can just do this. And then basically this code will basically just be transpiled. Oh my goodness. Guys, when I saw this, I remember learning this. I was so happy. And okay, but that's just a tangent. Maybe I can make a video about SAS later and how to actually compile or transpile your SAS files. But that's besides the question, right? So we went off on a tangent, a huge tangent, but that's just my personal opinion. So we did cover how to use the attributes, right? These are just our attributes that we put, how to use those attributes to basically perform styling, right? So now we are reaching the end of the CSS file. Now, just like the last video, I used media queries to make the website responsive, right? So basically, as you can see, hold on, let's do dash. As you can see, as the screen width shrinks, the website is responsive to that, and you can still open up your FAQs and stuff like that, and as it grows, boom, it's responsive. And basically, I just used media queries. As you can see, flex direction column. Initially it didn't have a flex direction, or it had a default flex direction of row, but then I specified flex direction of column, align item center, overflow visible. Okay, now this is important. Remember, initially, let's say Control F, then we say overflow, right? So we have two, right? One of two. The first one, overflow hidden, that's the FAQ box. But now, when it's in mobile, we made it visible, because remember when we talked about this illustration now overflows, and we allow the overflow to be visible. So that's one of the important things. Padding changes because now the screen width is smaller. The padding should also be smaller. And basically we just style other aspects. Oh yeah, here as you can see, the background illustration, the hero, and then the box become display none, because those were the elements that were initially displayed in desktop mode. But now that we are in mobile mode, just know that when I say desktop mode and mobile mode, or desktop view, and mobile view, it's not like, it's just the way I express, and I hope you guys can understand it. I assume that a person can easily understand what I'm talking about, but I don't think it's like a convention within the industry to say mobile view or desktop view, but it's just the way I say it. So basically, in mobile view, we make the things that were displayed in desktop view display none. And then instead, we make the things that we didn't display in desktop view block, because we wanted to actually now display when it's in mobile view. Then background illustration, boom, 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 where to cover. Oh yeah, the positioning had to be changed. We had to do some transformation. Then the FAQ. So that largely covers what's it called, the responsiveness of the website. So now let's get to the big daddy of them all. Now, okay, honestly, my first programming language was C++, but let's just say that JavaScript is the love of my life when it comes to programming languages. I love this programming language, especially TypeScript, but TypeScript was not necessary. TypeScript is legendary, but that's besides the point. As who's that character? Barney from How I Met Your Mother would say, legendary. JavaScript is amazing. I do not care what people say about JavaScript, whether you can say 0 equals 0 is false, blah blah blah. Hey man, just enjoy the language, bruh. Okay, but that's besides the point. Let's cover the content. Let's cover what needs to be covered. So now, okay, the way people usually learn how to manipulate the DOM is not with querySelector. I remember back in the day there used to be like what's it called? Okay, wait, let me duplicate this. Right? Let me comment this out. And then basically they would have like document dot get elements by class name, and then they'll just put in the class name like that. Or let's just say ID, right? Then you say get element by ID, and then you just provide the ID name, right? So those are the conventional ways, but I just prefer query selectors, because the way query selectors can be done is that it basically you can use your knowledge of CSS selectors within the query selector, and then it will return an element or elements. Now, when you want to return an element, you would say document.querySelector, and that's just it. It returns one, just one. Hold on, can you see here? Parent node.querySelector, and then the return type is element or null, right? But we want to highlight the fact that it returns an element, right? But if you say document.querySelector all, it then returns a node list of elements, right? That is a very important distinction that you need to be aware of if you want to work with querySelector, right? So now this video, I mean, like in this we will largely cover basic JavaScript, right? This is just basic JavaScript. So now basically you can essentially think of querySelector all returning an array. Let's just call it an array, and then this will basically contain that array. So now when we use FAQ elements dot for each, this is equivalent to, let's just make a loop, right? This is basically equivalent to using a loop. So basically this could be like for, let's just use that, index, as long as index is less than, yes, as long as index is less than FAQ, let's just say, yeah, as long as this is less than FAQ, then index plus plus. And then one thing we would do is like, would say the element would equal maybe FAQ and then index, and then we would have an index. So basically this is essentially it. A for each is just basically a shorter way of loops, or at least looping over an array. It's a what's it called? It's an array method that basically JavaScript allows you to perform. And within that for each, you basically pass in a function. And then what the function does, the function is what will execute, or the contents of the loop, right? So with the for each, what usually happens is that it passes an element, and in the second argument, it passes an index. Hold on. Yes, can you see here in the callback? Hold on. For each, in the callback function, it says that it can pass in the value, in the key, which is basically the index, and for the parent, I've never dealt with the third argument, so I don't know. But at the end of the day, then you can just have this block of code. Now everything within here is basically like what is inside your for loop. So that covers the for each method. Now one person would ask me, like, dog, why are you using a for loop? What are you doing, man? The reason why I use a for loop is because I didn't want to use querySelector for all the FAQ elements. Like, let's just say first FAQ element. I didn't want to use like a querySelector or use the DOM methods to get this specific FAQ element and get a separate FAQ element and get the separate FAQ element. What I instead did was just get all the FAQ elements within the FAQ element. Get all the FAQ elements within the FAQ. Whoa, that is such a weird thing to say, the way I said it. But basically, all the FAQ elements shared a similar what's called structure, like, well, not structure, but an event listener. So we basically used the for each to basically assign an event listener that is largely the same across all these different FAQ elements. Now let's go over the event listener, right? So basically, for each element within the for loop, remember the element represents every single, or represents the current element that we're working with within that for loop. We use the add event listener to add an event listener. I mean, it's self-descriptive. And then the event listener was click, right? So whenever an FAQ element is clicked, something happens. Now, in the second argument, you have to pass in the function. Now, this is what gets executed when the click happens, right? So what are we doing here? Basically, this ensures that whenever a user clicks on an FAQ element, it opens or it closes, right? So here we saved a couple of things that we needed. We have the index, and I saved it as element index, and we get the state. Now remember, we're going back to the data FAQ state attribute that we placed in here. And what we basically doing is we're trying to get the value that this attribute holds within that specific FAQ element, right? So that basically gets whether the FAQ element within that specific element is closed or open. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Now, one of the things that we do is that we say element.set attribute. Now, this set attribute basically says, okay, I got the specific. Let's say someone clicked this FAQ element, right? The event listener basically registers a click. Oh my God, this is amazing, right? So now what happens is that the set attribute, basically this is how we manipulate the DOM, right? Basically, when we call set attribute, whatever value, now maybe this complicates it a little bit. Let me comment that out. Basically, when we say element dot set attribute, whatever value we pass in here will be saved, right? And the DOM will be manipulated. That's how it works, right? Now, inside here, I added, right? So let's just say I added a little bit of flair. So basically, we're setting an attribute called data FAQ state, which we have covered. And what we're basically doing is we are looking at whether the state, right? This is the state right here. We're looking at whether the FAQ is opened, right? And if it is opened, this is basically called a ternary operator. This is like the shorthand version of an if-else statement. So if the state is opened, then we'll set the data FAQ state to closed. But if this happens to be false, that logically means that the state is closed, then we will set the data FAQ state to opened. It's just a ternary operator, don't worry. Now, logically speaking, if the state is closed, then let's just read this comment. Logically speaking, if the state is closed, that must mean the user is trying to open the FAQ element. Now, if the user is trying to open, then every other FAQ element must be closed. Now, basically, let's open one FAQ element. What does this mean? Why did I comment this? What does this all mean? Now, this is what it means. Basically, we get whether or not the state was closed, right? So if the state was closed, it logically means that within here, we ended up opening it, right? That's why we say if state equals closed, because if the state was closed, that means it eventually gets opened. So if a FAQ gets opened, what do we want to do? We do not want every single other FAQ to be open while we open. Let's just comment this out. I think it's better to just view it visually, right? So basically, this FAQ is open, right? Now, if I open this, notice this FAQ element doesn't close. If I open this, these are the two do not close. Now, depending on the client or depending on the person that wants you to implement this, some of them might want the user to be able to just view all of these FAQ elements open. And some of them might specify that, hey, no, I just want a person to look at one FAQ at a time. So basically what this does is basically we take the FAQ elements. Now remember, FAQ elements. This is an array of the FAQ elements, right? Plural FAQ elements. And for all those FAQ elements, we get the element in the index. Now, if the index is not the element index, this basically ensures that we jump over the clicked element, then we will set that attribute FAQ state to closed. It seems like the JavaScript seems a little bit complicated. Maybe the way I describe it is a little bit difficult. But if you were to look at this code after a while, then you would realize what's going on, right? So that was about it. That's the JavaScript covered. So I would just like to go over a brief overview of what we have actually covered within this video. We basically were introduced to the website. We briefly went over the website. We briefly went over the responsiveness itself. We also went through the setup. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention was that I used the live server extension for this, but that was already mentioned in the last video. So we basically set up, we talked about the gradient maker. Basically this allows us to make a background gradient. Just close this. Basically make a background gradient. We went through where we also went through the data attributes. Basically these, you could just describe them as, these are attributes that we as developers have made by ourselves. This class is an attribute. Data FAQ is also an attribute, but usually for the ones that we make on our own, we usually prefix that we make on our own with data. I guess it's just a convention. I do not know where I read this. I remember I did this a long time ago, but I remember this just said put data as a prefix. Now we also covered how the images were handled. I didn't actually go over positioning and then using like position absolute. I only covered static, so maybe that's my fault. But that's like an entire topic on its own. We went through the FAQ. Where's the FAQ? Well, not the FAQ box, but we went through the FAQ and all the FAQ elements. We went in depth on how we actually implemented the responsiveness of this website. Ooh, wrong one. Yeah, there it is. We also went in depth on how we implemented the responsiveness. And then we also went through the love of my life, JavaScript. Ooh. We also went through JavaScript, which was a really, like, it seems complicated. I think for beginners, I think this could seem complicated because this already just touches on multiple topics that fall within JavaScript. They're not complicated, it's just different topics that newbies would still need to learn. So yeah, that's about it, man. It was a really fun project. I had fun with it. Although I do not know why I didn't like position this better, because as you can see at the top, the illustration is cut off. But that would be something that I would have to sort out some other time. Not now though, but some other time. But that's the video. If you liked it, say you liked it. Like, share. What's this? Like, share, comment, subscribe. Boom, boom, boom. And then that's about it.